Boy, the news just keeps on coming out of Guantanamo Bay Prison. This time, another article by Carl Rosenberg today on the New York Times regarding the USS Cole bombing trial. Um, Prosecutors disclosed discovery of secret Guantanamo prison videos. Let's see what it has to say. Prosecutors have discovered secret videos of guards forcibly removing the accused mastermind of the bombing of the Navy destroyer Cole from his cell at Guantanamo Bay around the time federal agents claim he voluntarily confessed to his role in the al-Qaeda plot, the lead prosecutor told the trial judge on Wednesday. The surprise disclosure could cause more delays in Guantanamo's longest-running death penalty case, which has been in pretrial proceedings since 2011. The judge is retiring from the Army and has scheduled closing arguments for next week on the question of whether to allow 2007 statements made by the defendant, Rahim al-Nashiri, at his eventual trial. I think there's going to be a problem because al-Nashiri was actually tortured. So I don't think his statements are going to be valid. But the videotapes have not been turned over to either the judge or defense lawyers. Instead, a prosecutor, Michael J. O'Sullivan, said the tapes were so sensitive that government agents were preparing them for screenings in classified settings after certain information was apparently obscured. This is the problem, is that you have the U.S. federal government not allowing these trial judges in these military commissions to actually have unfettered access to this information, this evidence. Instead, the evidence is partially classified on matters of national security. This is the reason why they didn't allow for these trials or hearings to be taking place in New York. First of all, it wouldn't have taken 20 years. And second of all, you can't have classified information as evidence, obviously. That's because this is a military commission. The military is run by the federal government. Agents have testified that in January 2007, Mr. Nashiri boasted of his role in the Cole attack, which killed 17 sailors off Yemen in October of 2000. The defense lawyers have long argued that he told federal agents what he thought they wanted to hear because he had earlier been tortured. Well, there you go. Even if he told the truth, it still wouldn't matter because we don't know whether or not he actually did it because he was tortured. Since all we have is word of mouth, we don't have Mr. Nashiri on audio tape or written documentation stating that he is the mastermind of the Cole bombing plot. And the video I just did earlier about the statements of eyewitnesses, well, they can't corroborate anything here because they were under duress by the Yemeni government, because there was always a government official in the same room as these eyewitnesses, because they didn't want them to reveal too much that might implicate either the Yemeni government or al-Qaeda in Yemen. So you don't know what you're doing. You're jumping from one area to another. On Wednesday, Mr. O'Sullivan said government officials screened the first up to 17 videos this week for defense lawyers after some sort of secret processing he would not describe in open court. What? So you're telling me that evidence that is going to be used in the prosecution's case can't be actually obtained, declassified by a judge? Who's running the show here? Obviously, it's the federal government, not the judge. At least some of them showed Mr. Nashiri being forced out of his cell in late 2006 and early 2007, around the time of his interrogations, Mr. Sullivan said. Well, there you go. The technique is typically being carried out at the Guantanamo prison by 7 specially trained guards in black riot gear, their faces obscured, who put a defiant prisoner face down on the ground and then in restraints. In 2017, the prison published photos of soldiers trained on how to do it. This was all given a seal of approval by the late Secretary of Defense under the Bush administration, Donald Rumsfeld. He gave the authorization from Bush, of course. He gave the authorization to employ harsh, strict measures to be employed, tactics that were hidden under the title enhanced interrogation techniques. In other words, torture. Remember when George Tenet, director of the CIA, told in that 60-minute special, we don't torture people? Annie W. Morgan, one of Mr. Nashiri's lawyers, said the only video the defense lawyers have been allowed to see show guards cutting shackles off the prisoner's ankles 8 days before his 2007 interrogations, but none of him being shackled and removed from his cell. Defense lawyers originally asked for videos of the prisoner's treatment in Camp 7 in 2011 when he was charged. The judge said in a ruling last year, prosecutors had replied that there were none. Then, because they destroyed those videos under orders from Jose Rodriguez at the CIA. Then, more than a year ago, Mr. Nashiri's lawyers spotted an entry in a prison logbook describing how guards cut shackles off the prisoner's ankles because a key had broken off inside, and that a special unit of military cameramen had been called. They then asked prosecutors for any video of the episode. On June 16th, Ms. Morgan said the prosecution disclosed the existence of more than a dozen videos, including the one showing the ankle shackles being removed. In looking for a video of that account, their prosecutors apparently found the others. Oh, just so happens. Ms. Morgan said Guantanamo prison records in 2006 and 2007 showed that Mr. Nashiri was subjected to an increasing number of forced removals from his cell just before his interrogations. She called it a deliberate attempt to remind him of the harsh treatment he received in CIA black sites and what would happen if he did not cooperate. In the black sites, agency employees waterboarded him, confined him to a wooden box, threatened him with death, and had him shackled in painful positions to gain his cooperation. He was kept in isolation and at times abused rectally. What's with this perversion of the CIA, of the U.S. military at Guantanamo? Where's your humanity? Obviously, there is none, because they justified it saying, well, these people are evil, and if they're not guilty, well, I just served my country. I don't question orders. And there's the problem. They don't question. And this is not in the code of ethics in any military guidebook. And if you didn't do it, you were considered a traitor. So there's a lot of pressure on these soldiers, too. While Mr. Nashiri was in Thailand in 2002, the CIA made videotapes depicting the treatment of him and another prisoner known as Abu Zubaydah, but then destroyed them 3 years later. Remember the tapes I told you about Jose Rodriguez destroying? Those are the tapes. In place of that destroyed evidence, the videos of Mr. Nashiri at Guantanamo's Camp 7 prison in 2006 and 2007 will give at least a glimpse into that behavior, Ms. Morgan said. The judge asked the prosecutor for the national security justification for withholding copies of the tapes from the judiciary and the defense, and suggested in open court that it was perhaps the need to protect tactics. Exactly right. So the judge called him out on it. That's exactly what's happening here, because the prosecution knows that if it's the tactics, nothing Mr. Nashiri revealed to his interrogators can be used in court. And then there's a tribunal or a hearing at Guantanamo about whether or not Mr. Nashiri should be released. Even if he told the truth, that he actually is the mastermind of the USS Cole, thanks to your intelligence services, thanks to these prison guards at Guantanamo, they actually thought they were doing a service. They actually were screwing themselves and the victims' families of these bombings. Because if Mr. Nashiri was right, and he is the mastermind of the USS Cole attack, well, he gets to walk because your actions service against the country and the defense. Because you wanted to play tough guy. Mr. O'Sullivan responded, it's been cleared for display only. That's all about I can tell you at this point. Well, that would mean that somebody within the Pentagon or the White House made it clear that the evidence shown in this case has to be selected, right? We can't show that we tortured these people. And at the same time, if they have no evidence besides Mr. Nashiri's own admission, which was made under duress, well, guess what? This was all a waste of fucking time. Once the videos were processed, he said prosecutors would offer classified screenings on a rolling basis, perhaps beginning as early as next week. So there you have it. And thank you, Cal Rosenberg, for being on top of this, the best in the country. There you have the USS Cole bombing trial or hearing is actually going through the federal government's own versions of what could be allowed and what could be seen even by the courts. The hell with the defense. The court, the judge himself. We're only going to show you a select view, and also you can't have a copy. You get to see it in your private chambers because according to Dick Cheney and the White House, the Bush White House, they're the ones who set the precedent about what classifies as a terrorist and what rights are afforded to him if there's not the Geneva Convention, right? Well, according to the Bush White House, anybody who's labeled a terrorist, which is supposed to be up to the Department of Justice, but they took that right away, and that's why Attorney General John Ashcroft and National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, as well as the Secretary of State Colin Powell, objected to Cheney because it was Cheney's call. He's the one who circumvented the rights of a detained prisoner, a foreign detained prisoner. To say that the White House is now, it's now up to the White House to determine who's a terrorist and what countries harbor terrorism. And the Geneva Convention, thanks to his lawyers like David Addington and John Yoo, criminals. By the way, they have an arrest warrant in I think in Malaysia or Thailand. The only countries that have guts to call out these psychopaths. And they circumvented the rights and created the loopholes. And so these people who are labeled enemy combatants, they don't get the process of the Geneva Conventions. You know what they get? They don't get to see the evidence against them. They don't get pretrial hearings. That means they are detained forever if they wanted to. Just like they did with Abu Zubaydah, called him a forever prisoner. Meanwhile, CIA back in 2006 said that you're not even Al-Qaeda, even after torturing him. Brutally, mercilessly. Country of Lithuania took up his case because he was tortured there too. So they circumvented these rights, and it's for a reason. It's so that they don't have to be held accountable to U.S. law, which would be much more fair and speedy than military tribunal hearings. This is the reason why the Cole bombing is there, and this is the reason why the 9/11 case is there. So this way it could drag out forever. All right, any more updates? I'll always keep you updated without prejudice and bias. See you in the next video.